folks. It's Zach from Feel Free to Argue. I want to talk to you a little bit about a book that I just recently finished, which I think is really awesome. It's written by Robert Scheer. He's like the head editor of Truthdig. And let me show you the book. There it is, called The Pornography of Power. And basically what it is this guy has been around for a long time. He was a reporter in the Vietnam War, and basically, you know, he's been a reporter both within and without the mainstream media ever since that time. You know, he basically was, let's see, I think he was with the LA Times for 30 years, and then he left to join up with Truthdig. But basically what this whole book is about the military-industrial complex and how much it has totally brought this country to its knees. And I really recommend it to anybody who wants to kind of get a grasp on the extent that the military controls the entire agenda, really, of this nation. And military spending particularly, and how, and I made this point before, you know, and so did Chalmers Johnson, that largely the military is this enormous jobs program now. At least that's the thing that keeps it from being curtailed. Because, you know, once you start spending money on any aspect of the military, well, you created a job for somebody. And now that person is going to want to keep that job, and that person's senator is going to want them to keep that job. And, you know, then they end up doing stupid, counterproductive crap because they're trying to stave this person's stupid military job. And a perfect example of this is he goes on this long explanation at one point of kind of Barbara Boxer's support of the C-17 transport aircraft. Now, C-17 is basically a completely useless airplane. Not in the sense that it doesn't fly, but in the sense that it's completely redundant with an older plane, which is larger and less expensive to operate, and if they wanted to refurbish the old planes, which generally speaking are in good condition anyway, they could be refurbished, or honestly rebuilt, much more cheaply than these smaller, more expensive planes. But this is all kind of aside from the fact that these planes, just in general, are not needed for modern warfare. You have most of the supplies, 90% of the supplies that are being sent to Iraq are sent by sea, because it's so much cheaper to send things that way. So 90% of the stuff is sent by sea. Aside from that, the stuff that is sent in by air can be sent in more cheaply by air, UPS or FedEx, which, by the way, is how most of the stuff went, which is basically because it's cheaper, and the military cares about these things. But unfortunately, even when the military is responsible, as in the case of the C-17, and leaves it out of the budget and says they don't want any more, these Congress people, you know, who have the factory in their district, all rally around it. They put it back into the budget. They give it to the military's wishes, and be damned. And, you know, just wonderful, like, hearing him go on and on about how, you know, this supposedly liberal, supposedly democratic, supposedly anti-war, you know, senator. I mean, she was sending me these notices all the time, you know, during the election, because I must have gotten on one of her lists. I desubscribed myself or whatever from her recently, because I was just getting sick of them, and they were just clogging up my inbox. But the more important question is, like, you know, why does she never see the relationship between her stupid support of the military-industrial complex and all these social programs that she was constantly decrying to me that they were being cut? Well, if you weren't being such a stupid woman and forcing the military to spend money on planes that are not needed just to save a few jobs in your home district, then maybe there would be money for those social programs that you want. But nobody draws that relationship. Or if they do, they're just completely cynical about it. It's like, oh, well, I know as a Democrat I'm expected to bellyache about the fact that there's no money for social programs. And it's just skin deep like that. They don't really actually care, about these social programs. So anyway, I strongly recommend Pornography of Power. There's much evidence there to, I think, for everybody, regardless of your political stripe. I mean, one of the people who comes out at fairly rosy in this book actually is John McCain. Because John McCain actually has stood up on a couple of times, on a couple of occasions, and fought against elements of the military-industrial complex and gotten rid of waste. I mean, he even took on Boeing, for Christ's sake. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm like, regretting my decision not to vote for him. Far from it. There are like other aspects to John McCain that I found extremely troubling. Not the least of which, most of the good things that he did in his past, he was busy running away from in 2008. But all of that aside, I think it shows you that ideology will not serve you. Democrat, Republican, it's just garbage. I mean, what you need to care about is whether people actually show some goddamn principles or not. And, there are a lot of people in this book, that are perceived one way. And yet, you look at their activities having to do with their intersection with the military-industrial complex. Their activities are completely offensive, and I think just about everybody would regard them that way, if these things were widely known, but they're not. Because this, the military-industrial complex is heavily tied in with the mainstream media, and that's why you don't get stuff that's critical of it. That in addition to the fact that, Democrats, as he points out over and over again, are always worried about, since McGovern, of getting nailed as being weak on defense. And so, if anything, that drives them to be even more irrational in support of, the military-industrial complex than Republicans. Because, Republicans, have it in their back pocket that they're going to be, better on defense. So it's the Democrats that have something to prove that they're not weak on defense. And so they always buy into this, like, stupid trap. Where, you're sitting there watching the debates and it's like, why is Obama sounding like more of a hawk than John McCain? And it doesn't make any sense unless you think about it from that viewpoint. It's like, oh, well, it may not be necessarily that he's more of a hawk than John McCain. Maybe he is, but the one thing he can't afford at all politically is to look weak, because that's the classic way of taking down Democrats. But that's just it. I mean, how are you ever going to have a peace candidate? How are you ever going to have somebody who dismantles the military-industrial complex if this is the way that we continuously keep framing everything? It's just never going to happen. But anyway, those are my observations and my thoughts. And as always, you can feel free to argue. This is Zach Elliott. Have a good day, everyone.